If your cucumber vines keep giving you a few good fruits and then quitting, the problem may not be your soil, your seed packet, or even the weather. You may be letting the plant finish its job too early. And once a cucumber vine thinks its job is done, it starts slowing down while you are still standing there waiting for the real harvest. That is where a lot of small gardens lose their cucumber crop. A cucumber plant does not care about filling your kitchen basket. It does not care about your pickling jars, your salad bowl, your farm stand table, or the raised bed you worked so hard to build in spring. Its job is much simpler than that. It wants to grow fast, make fruit, mature seed, and complete its life cycle. If you accidentally allow it to do that too soon, the plant has no reason to keep pushing hard. That is why one vine can look like a miracle in June and look half-finished by July. You see it all the time. A cucumber plant races up the bed, throws out big green leaves, sets a few beautiful fruits, and for a week you think, this is going to be the best cucumber year I have ever had. Then one fruit hides under the leaves. It gets fat. It turns pale. Maybe it starts going yellow. The skin toughens. The seeds inside begin to mature. And while you are busy looking at the top of the plant, the vine has already started shifting its energy away from production. The University of Minnesota Extension gives the plain version of this. Harvest cucumbers before they become overlarge with yellowish skin, because leaving very large cucumbers on the vine causes plant yield to decline. That one sentence explains more failed cucumber beds than most people realize. Most gardeners do not lose cucumbers because they are lazy. They lose them because cucumbers move faster than the human routine. Tomatoes give you time. Peppers give you time. Onions sit there and mind their own business. Cucumbers do not. A cucumber can go from perfect eating size to oversized trouble in a couple of hot days, especially in warm weather, especially after rain, especially when the plant is well fed and growing hard. That is the part people underestimate. If you only check your cucumbers on Saturday, but the plant is producing on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, the plant is working on a different schedule than you are. By the time you walk out with your basket, some of those fruits may already be past the stage where they help the plant keep producing. That is why serious growers, homesteaders, allotment gardeners, and old-school backyard gardeners do not treat cucumbers like a casual crop. They treat them like a fast crop. Fast crops need fast attention. And here is the good news. This is not a complicated problem. You do not need some expensive system. You do not need a greenhouse full of equipment. You do not need to baby the plant like it is fragile. You just need to understand the rhythm of it. Pick early. Pick often. Keep the plant young in its own mind. That sounds almost too simple, but it is the difference between a vine that gives you a handful and a vine that keeps sending cucumbers into the kitchen until you are looking for another jar, another recipe, another neighbor who has not already been given 3 bags. When a cucumber is dark green, firm, and still young, that is usually when it belongs in your hand, not on the vine. You are not waiting for it to become impressive. You are not trying to grow the biggest cucumber in the neighborhood. Big cucumbers are usually not the win. Big cucumbers are often the signal that the plant has started moving toward seed production. For slicing types, pick them before they get swollen and pale. For pickling types, pick them small and steady. Mississippi State Extension notes that cucumbers should be harvested before the fruit yellows, and over-mature fruit changes color depending on type. That is not just about flavor, it is about momentum. A cucumber vine in production is like a small machine. If you remove the young fruit before it matures, the plant keeps trying again. It sets more flowers. It pushes more fruit. It stays in the business of producing. But if you leave fruit hanging there until it is swollen with mature seed, the plant starts putting its energy into finishing instead of continuing. Myth versus fact right here. The myth is that you should leave cucumbers longer so the plant has time to make them better. The fact is, with cucumbers, waiting too long usually makes the fruit worse and the plant less productive. The sweetest spot is not the biggest fruit. The sweetest spot is the fruit picked before the plant starts treating it like a seed vessel. That is why the first real rule is not fertilizer. It is not variety. It is not even water. The first real rule is visibility. If you cannot see your cucumbers, you cannot manage your cucumbers. And if you cannot manage them, the vine will manage itself. That is, when fruits hide under leaves, behind mulch, under a neighboring squash plant, or along the soil where you do not notice them until they are pale, fat, and already pulling the plant in the wrong direction. This is why I do not like letting cucumber vines sprawl all over the ground unless there is no other choice. Yes, they will grow that way. Yes, people have grown them that way for generations. But in a small garden, a raised bed, a backyard plot, or an allotment where every square foot matters, sprawling vines waste space and hide the harvest. They also keep leaves closer to damp soil, make airflow worse, and make it harder to spot pest damage before it spreads. A trellis changes the whole conversation. When you grow cucumbers upward, the plant stops being a tangled mess and starts becoming a harvest wall. The leaves lift. The fruit hangs where you can see it. Air moves through the vine more easily. You can walk past in the morning with a cup of coffee and notice the one cucumber that would have been missed if it were lying under 6 leaves on the ground. That small detail can save the whole season. You do not need a fancy setup. A cattle panel tied to posts works. A strong netting frame works. A simple A-frame works. In a greenhouse or polytunnel, a string dropped from overhead works beautifully. In a backyard raised bed, even a sturdy fence panel can do the job if it is anchored well. The point is not to impress anybody. The point is to get the fruit off the ground and into your line of sight. For small farmers and serious home growers, that matters even more. Hidden fruit is lost money, lost food, and lost plant energy. On a little homestead, one productive row of cucumbers can mean fresh eating, pickles, relish, and extra produce for a small stand. But only if you can harvest cleanly and often. If the vines are crawling everywhere, every harvest turns into a search mission, and the vine will always hide one from you. That is the cucumber's favorite trick. It will put one perfect fruit right in front of you, then tuck another one behind a leaf like it is trying to end the season in secret. You think you picked clean. 2 days later, there it is, pale and oversized, hanging like a warning sign. Vertical growing does not make that impossible, but it makes it much harder to miss. This is where many gardeners start to see the whole plant differently. The trellis is not just support. It is not just space saving. It is part of the harvest system. It helps you keep the plant in production because it helps you remove fruit at the right time. And once you understand that, cucumber growing stops feeling random. But seeing the fruit is only half the battle. Because once a cucumber vine is producing hard, it becomes one of the hungriest plants in the summer garden. And if you ask it to keep filling baskets without feeding it on a steady rhythm, it will eventually stall, no matter how good it looked at the start. A cucumber vine that is feeding fruit every day is burning through resources faster than most gardeners expect. That is why a plant can look powerful one week and tired the next. The leaves are still there, the vines are still reaching, but the new growth gets thinner, the flowers slow down, the fruit comes out misshapen, and the whole plant starts acting like it has lost its push. That is usually not a mystery. That is momentum running out. Cucumbers are quick plants. Cornell's Home Gardening Guide describes them as heavy nitrogen feeders that require fertile soil. And anyone who has grown a strong vine can see why. They are not sitting still. They are climbing, flowering, filling watery fruit, replacing leaves, recovering from heat, and trying to outrun pests all at the same time. That takes steady feeding. But this is where people make two opposite mistakes. Some gardeners starve the plant because they think compost at planting time is enough for the whole season. Other gardeners panic when the plant slows down and dump on too much high-nitrogen feed, then wonder why the vine grows a jungle of leaves with fewer cucumbers than expected. Neither one is the answer. The goal is not to force the plant. The goal is to keep it from running empty while it is working. There is a difference. If you are growing in good garden soil with plenty of compost, the plant may not need a heavy hand early on. But once flowering and fruiting begin, especially in containers, grow bags, greenhouse beds, or raised beds that dry out quickly, you need a regular feeding rhythm. The Royal Horticultural Society recommends feeding container cucumbers every 10 to 14 days, and once flowering starts, moving toward a high potash liquid feed to support flowering and fruiting. That is the kind of rhythm small growers should pay attention to. Not because you need that exact product, not because one bottle is magic, but because the plant is telling you something. When it is making fruit, it needs steady support. A cucumber is mostly water, yes, but the plant still has to build the skin, the flesh, the stems, the leaves, the flowers, and the roots that keep the whole system alive. If the soil is weak, dry, exhausted, or uneven, the fruit will show it. You will see hooked cucumbers. You will see narrow ends. You will see fruit that starts strong and then stalls. You may see leaves fade earlier than they should. And sometimes, the hidden symptom is not the fruit at all. It is the growing tip. When the tip of the vine stops looking thick, fresh, and eager, the plant is starting to lose drive. That is the moment to act, not 3 weeks later. For a backyard gardener, a simple system is enough. Work compost into the bed before planting. Mulch once the soil is warm. Keep a balanced organic fertilizer or a suitable vegetable feed in the routine. When flowers and fruit start coming, feed lightly but regularly, instead of dumping a heavy dose once in a while. If you grow in containers, be even more consistent, because nutrients wash through and roots have less soil to search. For a small farmer, the same rule scales up. Do not wait until the row looks hungry. By the time a cucumber planting looks hungry from the path, you are already behind. Keep the row moving before the leaves start telling the story. And do not separate feeding from watering. A lot of cucumber problems that people call fertilizer problems are actually water rhythm problems. The plant cannot use nutrients properly if the root zone swings from soaked to bone dry and back again. Cucumbers want steady moisture, not drowning and drought in the same week. That is why drip lines, soaker hoses, rain barrels with a steady watering routine, or careful hand watering at the base can make such a difference. The worst habit is a hard blast of water over the leaves in the evening, then nothing for days. Wet leaves overnight invite trouble. Dry roots during fruit filling invite misshapen fruit. Overhead watering is not always a disaster, but if you are fighting mildew, leaf spots, or wet spells, watering at the base is the cleaner habit. In a small garden, this is one of the easiest corrections you can make. Keep the leaves as dry as you reasonably can. Keep the roots evenly moist. Keep the feed steady. That does not sound exciting, but it is how productive gardens are built. Now, here is the part that surprises people. You can do almost everything right and still lose the planting if you expect one set of vines to carry the entire summer. Most gardeners plant cucumbers once. They buy a packet in spring, start a few seeds, put the transplants into the raised bed, and then mentally check cucumbers off the list. The plant grows. It produces. Then heat arrives. Beetles show up. Powdery mildew finds the older leaves. The bottom of the vine gets tired. The plant has been harvested hard, fed hard, watered through storms and hot days, and suddenly, it is not the same plant anymore. Then the gardener starts trying to rescue it. They spray, they prune, they feed harder, they cut off ugly leaves, they search online for what deficiency causes yellow cucumber leaves. And sometimes, the honest answer is simpler than that. The vine is old. Not old like an apple tree. Old like a fast summer annual that was never built to be a permanent machine. Cucumbers are quick, generous, and temporary. That is their nature. You can stretch the harvest with good care, but you should not build your whole season on one planting and hope it behaves like a fruit bush. This is where small farmers often think more clearly than home gardeners. A small farmer does not usually ask one planting to do every job. They think in waves. They want the next planting coming on before the first planting collapses. That same thinking belongs in a backyard garden. You do not need a big field to use succession planting. You need a corner, a few pots, a second trellis, an empty stretch after lettuce comes out, or one sunny patch near the fence. Start a few new cucumber seeds while the first vines are still healthy, not after they are dead, not after mildew has already eaten half the row. While the first vines are still giving you cucumbers, you quietly get the next vines ready. That is how you avoid the sad gap. In warm regions, you may be able to sow another round every few weeks through the season. In cooler regions, northern states, the UK, Ireland, Germany, the Netherlands, Scandinavia, or mountain climates, you may only have time for one main crop and one backup crop. That still matters. One backup planting can be the difference between cucumber season ending in August and fresh cucumbers still coming in when everyone else's vines are finished. And the backup plants do not need to be many. 2 fresh vines can replace a tired patch better than 6 exhausted vines you keep begging to recover. A young cucumber plant has a different energy. It climbs with confidence. It flowers cleanly. It has not been beaten up by weeks of pests, heat, and disease pressure. When the older vine starts declining, the young vine is ready to take over. That is not a trick. That is crop planning. But there is one more layer that can change everything, especially if you grow in a greenhouse, a hoop tunnel, a small backyard with poor pollinator activity, or a place where summer weather keeps swinging between cold rain and harsh heat. Because sometimes the problem is not how often you pick, how well you feed, or how neatly you trellis. Sometimes the plant is flowering, but it is not setting fruit the way it should. That is a different problem, and it fools a lot of gardeners because from a distance, the vine looks busy. You see yellow flowers everywhere, so you assume cucumbers are on the way. Then a few days later, those tiny little fruits behind the flowers turn yellow, shrivel, and fall off. The plant did not forget how to make cucumbers. In many cases, the flower simply was not pollinated well enough, or the variety you chose is not suited to the way you are growing. This matters more now than it used to. A backyard in the suburbs may not have the pollinator traffic an old farmyard had. A greenhouse may be warm and protected, but bees may not be moving through it. A balcony garden 10 floors up may have beautiful vines and almost no insect help at the right time. Even allotment gardens can have strange weeks where rain, wind, or cold keeps pollinators from working the flowers when the plant needs them most. And cucumbers do not wait politely. Most traditional cucumber plants make separate male and female flowers on the same plant. The male flower has pollen. The female flower has the little baby cucumber behind it. For that baby cucumber to keep growing, pollen normally has to move from the male flower to the female flower. Bees usually handle that job outdoors. But if the weather is bad, the bees are scarce, or the plant is under stress, you may get flowers without a real crop. That is why some gardeners think they have a fertility problem when they actually have a pollination problem. The plant is blooming, the leaves are green, the vine is climbing, but the small fruits keep failing. That is your clue. If the baby cucumber starts swelling and growing, you are in business. If it yellows, wrinkles, and drops while still tiny, start thinking about pollination, stress, or variety choice. Now, you can hand-pollinate cucumbers. It works. You take pollen from a male flower and brush it onto the female flower. A small paintbrush can do it. Some growers simply remove a male flower and touch it directly to the female flower. In a small garden, that can save a crop when pollinators are weak. But for small farmers, older gardeners, busy home growers, and anyone who wants a simpler system, there is a better long-term move. Choose the right cucumber variety. This is where those strange seed packet words actually matter. You may see gynoecious. That means the plant is bred to produce mostly female flowers. More female flowers usually means more potential cucumbers. You may also see parthenocarpic. That means the fruit can develop without pollination. Put those two traits together, and you get a cucumber that can set heavy crops without depending so much on bees. For greenhouse growers, that can be a game changer. For a small backyard grower, it can also be a game changer. For someone growing in a hoop tunnel, a polytunnel, a screened area, a balcony, or a place with unpredictable weather, It can feel like the plant suddenly became easier to work with. Instead of waiting for the right bee to visit the right flower on the right morning, the vine can keep setting fruit with far less drama. That does not mean every old variety is bad. Some old outdoor cucumbers are excellent. Some handle local disease pressure better. Some taste wonderful. Some make great pickles. But if your goal is steady production from a small space, especially under cover, parthenocarpic types deserve a serious look. This is one of those small choices that can change the whole season before the seed ever touches the soil. A good variety will not fix neglect. It will not save a dry pot, a starving vine, or a plant buried under mildew. But it can remove one major weakness from the system. If the plant can set fruit without perfect pollination, you have one less thing working against you. And in a real garden, one less problem is worth a lot. There is another advantage. Many parthenocarpic cucumbers, when not pollinated, produce seedless or nearly seedless fruit. That can mean smoother eating, less bitterness in some types, and better texture when picked at the right stage. But do not misunderstand this. Variety helps, but stress still matters. A thirsty, overheated, neglected vine can still produce poor fruit. A seedless cucumber is not a miracle. It is simply a better tool for certain growing conditions. That is the way small growers should think. Not magic. Tools. A trellis is a tool. Mulch is a tool. Compost is a tool. Succession planting is a tool. Picking every day is a tool. Choosing a better cucumber type is a tool. None of them has to be complicated, but together they turn cucumbers from a gamble into a system. And once you start seeing the crop as a system, the mistakes become easier to spot. If the fruit is hiding, the system needs visibility. If the plant is slowing during harvest, the system needs feeding and water consistency. If the vine is old and disease is creeping up from the bottom, the system needs a younger planting ready. If flowers are coming but fruit is failing, the system needs pollination support or a better variety. If the plant is making huge pale cucumbers, the system needs more frequent harvesting. That is why I do not like cucumber advice that stops at give them sun and water. Sun and water are the beginning. They are not the system. A productive cucumber patch is built around pressure. The pressure of fast growth, the pressure of heat, the pressure of wet leaves, the pressure of insects, the pressure of fruits maturing too quickly, the pressure of a short growing window in cool regions and brutal heat in warmer ones. If you ignore that pressure, the plant looks fine until it does not. If you manage that pressure early, the plant can produce far beyond what most people expect from a few vines. And this is where small space growers have an advantage. You may not have acres. You may not have a tractor. You may not have a commercial irrigation system. But you can watch closely. You can harvest clean. You can fix one trellis before it becomes a mess. You can start 4 backup seeds in a tray. You can water at the base. You can train the vine upward. You can pick the cucumber today instead of waiting for it to become impressive tomorrow. That kind of attention beats size. A small garden that is managed well will often outproduce a large garden that is ignored. I have seen little raised beds feed families better than big messy plots because the grower understood timing. Cucumbers reward timing. They punish delay. They do not need you standing over them all day, but they do need you showing up before the problem gets expensive. The most expensive cucumber mistake is waiting until the plant looks bad. By the time leaves are yellowing heavily, mildew is spreading, fruit is misshapen, and the vine is barely pushing new growth, you are not managing the crop anymore. You are trying to rescue what is left. Sometimes you can buy time. Sometimes you can prune the worst leaves, feed lightly, water properly, and get another flush. But the better move is to prevent the collapse before it takes over. That starts with the way you plant. Crowding cucumber vines because you want more plants can actually give you less harvest. Too many vines jammed into one raised bed can trap humidity, shade each other, hide fruit, and create the perfect conditions for disease to creep in. A few well-spaced vines on a strong trellis can beat a crowded tangle almost every time. This is hard for new gardeners to accept because empty space feels wasted in spring. But empty space in spring becomes airflow in summer. And airflow is not decoration. It is disease prevention. It is easier harvesting. It is stronger leaves after rain. It is sunlight reaching more of the plant. It is the difference between a vine you can manage and a green knot you avoid touching because you know there is something ugly hiding underneath. That green knot is where cucumber seasons go to die. You know the look. Leaves piled over leaves, vines crossing over each other, a few flowers showing on top, but most of the real action buried underneath. You reach in and find one cucumber too late, then another one with slug damage, then another that grew bent because it was trapped between stems. That is not abundance. That is disorder pretending to be abundance. A productive cucumber patch should be easy to read. You should be able to walk along it and see the main vines. You should be able to spot young fruit quickly. You should know where the new growth is strong and where the old leaves are beginning to fade. You should be able to harvest without tearing the plant apart. When a garden is arranged that way, you catch problems early. When it is a jungle, the plant makes decisions before you do. And cucumbers make decisions fast. So if I were setting up a cucumber bed for a normal family, or a small grower trying to get real production from a modest space, I would not start with more plants. I would start with a better system. A strong trellis. Soil amended before planting. Mulch after the soil warms. Steady watering at the base. Light, regular feeding once the vines begin to work. Daily or near-daily harvesting once fruit appears. A second sowing started before the first one is tired. And if pollination is unreliable, I would choose a variety that does not make the whole harvest depend on a good bee day. That is how you turn cucumber growing from luck into rhythm. And the rhythm matters more than the size of the garden. One person with 4 well-managed vines can end up with more usable cucumbers than another person with 20 vines crawling across dry soil, hiding fruit, and starving through the hottest part of summer. That may sound exaggerated until you have seen it happen. But gardeners who grow food for the table know this already. Neglected abundance is not the same as harvest. A plant can look large and still give you very little that is clean, tender, and worth bringing into the kitchen. That is especially true with cucumbers. They are generous, but they are not forgiving in the way some crops are. A bean plant will give you another chance. Chard will keep pushing leaves. Potatoes quietly finish underground. Cucumbers are more dramatic. They grow fast, feed hard, set fruit quickly, and punish delays. Miss the harvest window too many times. Let the roots swing dry and wet. Allow disease to build in a crowded tangle, and the vine will not politely wait for you to catch up. But here is the relieving part. You do not have to be perfect. You do not need a flawless garden. You do not need to know every disease by name. You do not need to buy every tool people recommend online. You only need to stop making the few mistakes that hurt cucumber production the most. Do not let fruit mature on the vine unless you are saving seed. Do not leave the vines lying where you cannot see the harvest. Do not feed once in May and expect the plant to carry August. Do not wait until a planting is collapsing before starting another one. Do not ignore variety choice if your pollination is weak or you grow under cover. Fix those and the crop changes quickly. Even a struggling cucumber bed can often be turned around if it has not gone too far. Pick every usable fruit today. Remove anything oversized, yellowing, damaged, or bitter. Tie up the vines if they are still flexible enough. Open the plant so air can move. Water deeply at the base. Add a modest feeding if the plant is in active growth. Start a few fresh seeds somewhere else the same day. That last step matters, because sometimes the best way to save your cucumber season is not to save the oldest vine. It is to make sure a younger one is coming behind it. That is the part most gardeners learn too late. They fall in love with the first planting because they raised it from seed, protected it from cold nights, and watched it climb. So when it starts failing, they keep trying to revive it. There is nothing wrong with helping a plant recover, but food growers have to be practical. A garden is not a museum. If a vine is spent, diseased, and no longer earning its space, pull it, compost it if it is healthy enough, and let the next planting take over. A small garden becomes powerful when every space has a job. The trellis has a job. It keeps fruit visible and off the soil. The mulch has a job. It protects moisture and keeps splashing soil down. The feeding schedule has a job. It keeps the vine from running empty during fruiting. The harvest routine has a job. It keeps the plant producing instead of finishing. The second planting has a job. It keeps the kitchen supplied after the first vine gets tired. The variety choice has a job. It reduces weak links before the season even starts. That is old-school growing at its best. Not complicated, not flashy, just arranged so the plant has fewer reasons to fail. And when it works, you will know. The vines climb instead of crawl. The fruit hangs where you can see it. You stop finding giant yellow cucumbers hidden like bad news under the leaves. The plant keeps setting new fruit because you keep removing the young ones. Your harvests become smaller but more frequent, which is exactly what cucumbers want. Instead of one big disappointing flush, you get a steady stream. A few for dinner, a few for the fridge, a few for pickles, a few for a neighbor, then more again 2 days later. That is the kind of production people actually need. Not one perfect photo for the internet. Not one oversized cucumber that tastes like regret. Real food, coming in steadily, from a garden that is being managed with common sense. So before you blame the weather, before you blame the seed company, before you decide cucumbers just do not like your garden, look at the system. Are the fruits easy to see? Are you picking before they get pale and swollen? Are the roots getting steady moisture? Is the plant being fed while it is working? Is there air around the leaves? Is a younger planting already coming behind the old one? Did you choose the right type for your growing space? Those questions will tell you more than guessing ever will. Because cucumbers are not mysterious. They are fast, they are hungry, they are short-lived, they are easily stressed. But when you work with that nature instead of fighting it, they can become one of the most productive crops in the whole garden. A few vines can feed a table. A few well-timed plantings can stretch the season. And a gardener who picks early, feeds steadily, grows vertically, and keeps young plants coming can turn cucumbers from a short summer disappointment into a crop that keeps showing up until frost finally shuts the door. If you learned something useful today, type GROW in the comments so I know you are building a garden that feeds people for real. And if this helped you look at your cucumber plants a little differently, press like before you head back out to the garden.